Skeletons of the Marital Closet by Tang.
Chapter 1311. Okay, I will arrange it. Peter got up. Okay, then I'll go first and come to pick up Joshua later. I have invited friends to go fishing together, so I can't be late. Shawn and Gale got up together and sent him out. Dad's condition is indeed much better. He has been alone for too long, Gale said emotionally, especially the 4 years when she left. How Peter should miss her. Knowing that his daughter was still alive, but unable to contact or visit her, he could only pray silently in her heart and count the days. Gale's heart aches. Fortunately, there is Joshua. After a pause for a few seconds, Gale repeated, "Fortunately, there is Joshua." Joshua was really a treasure. When she could not hold on, thinking of Joshua gave her strength again. When she felt that she was about to lose Nicole, she thought of Joshua and saw hope again. When Dad was lonely and bored, Joshua made his life fun. Gale suddenly wanted to hug her son. She turned around and was about to go upstairs to see how the siblings were getting along when the phone rang suddenly. At first glance, it was Mary calling. "Hello, Mary," Gale said. "Gale." On the other end, Mary's voice was filled with grief, weak, and mixed with anger. "What's wrong? What happened?" Gale's heart tightened. She listened carefully and found that the other end was very noisy. There were women's sharp shouts from time to time. Mary sighed. "If it's convenient for you, come over now." Gale did not question further, but responded decisively. "Okay, wait for me a little bit." She walked out immediately without a second to lose. "Gale, where are you going?" Shawn asked. "To the hospital to visit Mary." Although she did not know what it was, she knew it must be serious. Normally, Mary would definitely explain things over the phone, but Mary did not bring up what was wrong but clearly sounded distressed. Gale must rush over as soon as possible. She jumped into the car without even waiting for Shawn to catch up, stepped on the accelerator, and drove away quickly. Mary was half lying on the hospital bed in the hospital's intensive care unit. Her face was a little pale, but she still looked at the woman at the door with all her energy. The woman was stopped by the bodyguards and could not come in. However, she kept yelling, and her voice echoed throughout the floor. The woman looked to be in her 40s. She looked young and was dressed luxuriously, but she was obviously not as elegant as Mary. She was covered in branded products, and her makeup was also very thick. She was carrying a huge luxury bag with the logo embossed all over it, and her nails were painted bright red. She looked flamboyant. "You might be able to stop me today, but can you stop me tomorrow, Mary?" the woman shouted. Chapter 1312. "Besides, I'll keep looking for you and bug you every day. Kill me if you can. You are so rich and powerful. You have 10,000 ways to deal with me." "I've been observing you in secret for so many years. Today, I will show myself for my daughter. I don't want to live a life in the shadows anymore." Mary breathed heavily, hearing these words. She felt heartbroken. The woman picked up the mobile phone again, dialed Matthew's number, and urged, "If you are not dead yet, come quickly and take care of your woman. She is disturbing me." Yes, she was Matthew's mistress and Natalie's mother, Heather Smith. She went directly to Mary's ward. Heather said angrily, "Let me tell you, even if you call Matthew for help, won't stop me. He can't stop me. Mary, you have been his first wife for a long time. Do you really treat yourself like you're the queen? Do you want to hear what Matthew said about you to me? He never talked about me in front of you, did he? You have to know that I am capable of staying at his side for so long and even delivered Natalie to your side. No matter what Heather said, Mary did not make a sound and listened quietly. She did not argue with Heather. She felt Heather was unworthy. A woman of this status did not even have the qualifications to be looked at by her. Heather was talking vigorously. She knew that Mary would feel uncomfortable hearing these words. The more uncomfortable she was, the more she wanted to say it. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from behind. "Why are you yelling?" Heather was stunned for a moment, then looked back. Gale stood behind her. Heather looked her up and down, with obvious scrutiny in her eyes. Heather's expression gradually became disdainful when she saw the young lady dressed ordinarily with no branded items. "Who are you? What does it have to do with you? Are you Mary's lapdog?" Heather asked. Gale smiled slightly. "It's been a long time since anyone has disrespected me so much. You should be lucky. What do I need to be thankful for?" Heather was used to being arrogant. Although she could not get into the circle of noble ladies, in her circle she had the right to speak and say what she says. It was because with Matthew next to her, she was the richest in her friend groups. Therefore, Heather's life was relatively cushy. Even if something got wrong and something happened, Matthew's contacts could basically help her settle it. So, that led to Heather's ability to snub people. As long as she saw that someone was weaker, she would bully them. If they could not be bullied, she would try her best to curry favor. Obviously, Gale in front of her was classified as weak by her. "Fortunately, I'm alone now. If Shawn was here, I don't think you would be standing there," Gale replied. Her insults were so jejune. Heather snorted. "You are rather rude for a young girl like you. Why? Do you have a backer?" "Who is the person behind you?" Gale asked. "Who is behind you?" "Matthew. Do you know him?" "He's the chairman of the yarn group," Heather said proudly. "This is Mary's ward. You came here to make a scene. What is your relationship with Matthew?" Gale thought, could this be Natalie's mother? "Why do you care about our relationship? Are you the rescuer that Mary called?" Heather said. Chapter 1313. "Yes." Heather seized her up again and suddenly remembered something. "What was the name of the person you mentioned?" "Shawn Wood." Heather's expression suddenly changed. Although she did not know who she was, nor had she seen her before, she knew that in Sis City, no one with the surname Wood could be messed with. That was what Matthew had been telling her all along. The Wood family is the number one wealthy family. Nobody can afford to offend them. "What's your relationship with the Wood family?" Heather stuttered. Gale answered. "It doesn't matter what our relationship is. Anyway, it's 100 times stronger than your relationship with Matthew." After speaking, Gale came over. The bodyguard at the door automatically opened it very respectfully. "Mrs. Wood, please." Hearing this address, Heather shivered. Mrs. Wood? Was she the Wood family's young lady? She covered her mouth in fright. What the hell did she say just now? God, it was really over. What to do now? Heather wanted to say something, but Gale ignored her. Gale walked into the ward. "Mary, Are you okay? Only then did she realize that it was Natalie's mother. This woman, who has been hiding for more than 20 years, has revealed herself today. It's just noisy, nothing else. Matthew acted like a coward and refused to show up for a long time. Now I have seen Heather. What a country shrew, Mary replied. She really could not believe that Matthew would like this kind of woman. Her appearance was average, and she had no class. Her personality was even more pungent, not gentle at all. What caught Matthew's eyes about Heather? The more Mary thought about it, the angrier she became. If Heather is some kind of magnificent beauty, I will admit defeat. However, he betrayed our marriage for someone like her and even had a child together? Gale shrugged. The grass is greener on the other side. Indeed, in what way was Heather comparable to Mary? No matter what, Mary was better than Heather. Mary was from a good family background, well educated, beautiful, and gentle. At first glance, she looked like a rich lady who was nurtured by a famous family. She was the perfect wife. Looking at Heather again, she looked like a vixen. Matthew was blind. Yes, it's the sneaking around that he likes, Mary agreed. Mary said it loud enough for Heather to hear. She and Heather were irreconcilable. Heather heard it. Chapter 1314. Heather was not as arrogant as before because Gale was here, but that sense of superiority was still very obvious. They really did not know where her sense of superiority came from. I have been able to be by Matthew's side for so many years, so I naturally have many wins. In those few years, he spent his days out of the house, and the women around him changed one after another. You don't know about this, do you? Yes, I don't know. Otherwise, I would have divorced him long ago. At that time, he still needed to rely on you. Naturally, he wanted to hide it from you for fear that you would find out. He was really proud. The beauties rushed up, one after another. They were better looking than me and had better figure than me. But he picked me. Mary was so angry that she might explode. You are not the only woman that has been with him? Heather nodded. That's right. It's not an exaggeration to say that he has a new woman every day. Have fun one day and kick them away the day after. Mary just felt disgusted. After so many years of being married, she never thought that Matthew would be so unbearable. Heather was so proud, but I stood out from the crowd. I even gave birth to a child for him. Gale glanced at her contemptuously. Not ashamed, but proud? Where did you get dignity? Oh, I almost forgot. How can a mistress have dignity? After thinking for a while, Gale said, No, you weren't even counted as mistress at first, but just one of many women Matthew played with. Where do you rank? 8? 9? You. Heather wanted to refute back, but when she thought of Gale's identity, she could only suppress her temper abruptly. Mrs. Wood, I am not here for you. I'm here for her. Heather pointed straight at Mary. I hope you won't get involved and meddle. Gale raised her eyebrows. What if I want to meddle? Heather was very unconvinced. How did Mary manage to get her to help? Heather said, Mary, you should be lucky. Lucky? Yes, the child I gave birth to was a girl. At that time, Matthew wanted a son with all his heart. Of course, I wanted to fulfill his wish. It's a pity. Heather was still full of regret. If it was a boy, her status could be raised to a higher level. Most importantly, the son could inherit the family business. By that time, the entire Yarn family would belong to her son. It was a pity that Natalie had the wrong gender. Also, Mary, you must really want to know how Matthew described you in public, right? Heather covered her mouth and snickered. He said you are too rigid, too serious, and a prude. Heather dragged out her voice. At most, you are just an accessory. Mary was too anxious to say something. She choked and coughed repeatedly. You, you get out! Get out! You are not welcome here. Go! Mary said. Her upbringing allowed Mary to maintain her last sanity. She did not swear. She was very restrained. Heather replied, You think I want to see you, an old woman? It's all because of Natalie. Where is my daughter now? What happened to her? I want to see her. You would not want to see Natalie, Heather asked. Why? She already knows her backstory, so she should recognize me instead of calling you a mother. Heather also wanted to hear Natalie call her mom. Chapter 1315. She was her daughter, who was the stepping stone for her to enter the Yarn family. Now, she would be the stepping stone for her to squeeze Mary away. After swallowing her anger for so many years, how could Heather have been willing to be a mistress? She wanted a title. Gale sneered and said, So you came here for Natalie. Heather looked at her fawningly. Mrs. Wood, you should know Natalie too. How is your relationship with her? She is smart and nice, and about the same age as you. You should get along with her. My relationship with her was not great. Heather's smile froze, but immediately she smiled more obsequiously. It's okay. Friendship takes time. Go out for lunch a few times, go shopping a few times, and you'll get acquainted, Gale said. I'm afraid I can't afford it. How is it possible? You are too honorable. It would be a blessing for Natalie to befriend you. Mary and Gale both felt nauseous looking at her. Such low-rank flattery was really not bearable. Mary has been good at making friends and has many friends in C-City, all of whom were wives of rich families and the circle of noble ladies and wealthy families. However, Mary never tried to please anyone. One was because of her own status as a noble woman, and the other was that Mary was kind-hearted and gentle, so she was very popular. If Heather were allowed to maintain the relationship among the noble ladies, everyone would look down on her, and even the Yarn family social ranking would be lowered. Gale looked at her and said, Are you looking for Natalie today? Yes. I haven't seen her for a long time. I'm worried. Gale asked, You said just now that Natalie should recognize you. It seems that you also know a lot of things.
Heather was naturally very happy to answer her question. She nodded again and again. Yes, Matthew slept with me yesterday. I saw that he was in a bad mood, so I questioned him. He told me everything.
Heather also deliberately glanced at Mary. She slept with Matthew last night. Mary was alone in the ward. How pitiful and ridiculous. However, what Heather did not know was that she was the most ridiculous of all. It seems that Matthew didn't tell you everything. He also kept a lot of things from you, Gale said with a half sarcasm and half smile. Heather denied. Impossible. He told me everything and asked for advice. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, Mary and Gale both laughed. They looked at her like a clown. However, Heather did not know it yet. What are you laughing at? We chatted all night. He bared his heart and soul. Matthew loves me very much, Heather said confidently. Gale asked, if he dotes on you so much, why doesn't he show up after you've been here for so long? Chapter 1316. He is in the company, busy with work. Maybe he is on the road. He's stuck in traffic. Heather seemed to have regained her confidence. Gale replied, first of all, Yarn Group is currently in a state of shutdown. He would just sit in the office blankly when he goes to the company. Secondly, it's not even rush hour. It's clear that he just doesn't want to come and leave you here alone to make a scene. Matthew was really treacherous and cunning. He wanted to save Natalie, but he knew that he was helpless. He could do nothing, so he simply manipulated Heather to fight on his behalf. Anyway, he and Mary have already turned their backs on each other. No matter what, Heather was Natalie's biological mother and would do her best to save her daughter. Matthew pushed Heather out for battle, and he hid behind like a coward. Heather was stunned. Gale continued, no one can see Natalie now. She is hopeless. Do you still want to see her? It's ridiculous. Heather trembled. Hopeless? What happened to Natalie? What happened to her? Didn't Matthew tell you that? Heather was instantly speechless. Gale pointed to herself again. Do you know me? You are Mrs. Wood. Who doesn't know the Wood family? The most powerful family. Mrs. Wood, I am blind for not recognizing you. I apologize immediately. I'm sorry. Heather bowed shamelessly. Just when she finished bowing and was about to get up, Gale told her, I am not only Shawn's wife, but also Mary's daughter. Heather thumped, lost her footing, and fell to the ground. I am her biological daughter. Did Matthew tell you about that? Gale said. Heather propped her hands on the ground, staring up at Gale. In her eyes, there was horror, shock, and disbelief. She looked at Gale carefully. You are? I've been missing for so many years. You didn't expect that I would come back? Heather's face turned extremely pale. Gale stared at her oppressively. You and Matthew planned well. After I disappeared, you sent Natalie to Matthew's house. Since you can't enjoy having a part in the Yarn family, you will do everything possible to send your daughter to the Yarn family. You came up with this idea, right? Matthew had to rely on his father-in-law and mother-in-law to build up his company, so he definitely didn't dare to do such a bold thing. You must have instigated it. Now that Natalie has grown up pampered, you should also be planning how to make Natalie recognize you as her biological mother. Unexpectedly, I suddenly returned, disrupting everything. Heather opened her mouth halfway, trembling uncontrollably. Now you heard that something happened to Natalie, and Matthew had no choice but to save her. But it's useless. Gale shook her head. Heather, don't you dare think you can save Natalie. Gale's words were powerful. Heather looked at her fixedly. Natalie, where the hell is she? Gale chuckled lightly and said, she walked the road you paid for her and then went astray. Astray? Yes. You want to obtain the glory and wealth of the rest of your life through her? It's completely useless. A few seconds later, Heather suddenly started to back away quickly, just wanting to get as far away from Gale as possible. She slammed into the door with a bang, so loud that it hurt to hear it. However, Heather did not seem to feel it. She got up in a panic, turned around, and ran out of the door. She wanted to escape from here. All her arrogance and complacency just now were gone. Chapter 1317. However, after a few seconds, Heather retreated step by step back into the ward. Her footsteps were light, and her face was full of horror. Both Gale and Mary were very curious. Did Heather not run away just now? What had she seen that caused her to come back in? A pair of leather shoes stepped in at the ward's door. Shawn appeared. His hands were naturally hanging by his sides. His expression was indifferent and calm, and his steps were steady. He did nothing. However, Heather had already turned pale with fright. This man's aura was too strong, so strong that she dared not look directly at him. "Why are you running?" Shawn slightly raised his eyebrows. "Me? Who are you?" Shawn asked again. With a plop, Heather fell to the ground again. She asked tremblingly, trying to say a complete sentence. "Who are you?" "Me." "Right," Shawn said lightly. "Let me introduce myself." Heather paused for 2 seconds and suddenly thought of something. She was about to speak, but Gale was one step ahead of her. "That's my husband, Shawn." Heather gasped. It was Shawn, the famous Shawn. She guessed it, but she was not sure. Now that she thought about it, who else can release such an oppressive aura? This was a big shot that Heather would never encounter in her entire life. "It turned out to be Mr. Wood. I really look up to you. I am so lucky to meet you today," Heather said. Shawn walked to the sofa and sat down calmly and gracefully. "Introduce yourself." He lowered his gaze, not looking at her at all. "You were causing a ruckus in the ward and running in and out again, disturbing Mrs. Yarn's rest." After finishing speaking, he raised his eyes and glanced lazily at Heather. "It's really... Damn." His tone made her shudder. Heather was sweating all over, and the clothes on her back were completely soaked. She had forgotten how to speak. Her arrogance prior disappeared. Heather finally believed it at this moment that Matthew deliberately got her into trouble and left her to deal with the aftermath. Heather had been in the dark for many years, and only Matthew knew her identity and where she lived. Now, Heather showed up at trouble's door. Chapter 1318. Everyone knew her. She blew herself up for him. Matthew was so scheming. What a cruel heart. Shawn raised his voice. "Don't want to tell me yet? Do you need help?" Heather was shocked and immediately replied, "No need, Mr. Wood. I'm just an unknown person. I'm not worthy to be known by you." She laughed dryly, and there was only one thought in her mind: run. However, Heather looked at the door and saw the bodyguards guarding the door. She could not escape. "You are Matthew's woman and Natalie's mother, isn't it?" Shawn said lightly. Heather could only admit, "Yes, my name is Heather." Next to him, Gale asked curiously, "How do you know? Have you seen her before?" "I took a guess." "How do you guess?" Shawn crossed his legs, and a smile appeared. "She looks like a conniving slut. Matthew will like someone like her," Gale said. "You're right. I usually am." Shawn frowned slightly. Gale added, "Shawn is well informed. He has seen all kinds of women. If he sees a lot, he will naturally be able to tell them apart quickly, right?" "Gale, what are you talking about?" "I'm telling the truth," Shawn explained. Heather's appearance is only part of the reason. It's because you came here in a hurry after Mary called you. I came over to see that it was just a woman, so I could easily guess. Heather was the only one who could cause trouble in the ward and hurt Mary. Also, Gale, you didn't wait for me, Shawn said. He was also complaining. Immediately afterward, Shawn said, I am also very concerned about Mary. How could you leave me behind? It seems that I was not allowed to fulfill my duties as a husband. He was turning a corner and complaining to Mary. Shawn learned from Joshua this morning. I didn't think too much about it and just drove straight here. Besides, I thought I could handle it, Gale said quickly. I know you can. Even though he knew that she could do it, Shawn still hoped that he could be by her side and support her all the time. Gale nodded and stopped talking. If she kept talking, Shawn would definitely make more fuss. Chapter 1319. It was all Joshua's fault. He inspired Shawn, Mary said. I thought Mr. Wood had something to do, so Gale came here alone. Unexpectedly, this girl was so reckless that she even forgot to wait for you. Yeah, that's her temperament. I'm used to it, Shawn replied. Gale was speechless. Look at this scene and listening to their conversation. Heather was filled with envy. Why could Mary's daughter marry into the Wood family and be the young mistress of the top wealthy family? Forget it. They all say that wealthy men are fickle and indifferent. They put themselves first and always have lots of women around them. However, Mr. Wood was simply a breath of fresh air. Not only was he extremely handsome, he had a well-built body and elegant fashion taste. More importantly, he was doting on Gale. What kind of luck did this woman, Mary, have? Her daughter had been missing for so long, not only came back but also married so well. Unfair. Why? Just as Heather was thinking, she felt a sharp gaze fall on her. She looked and found that it was Shawn. Mr. Wood, she shouted quickly. Mr. Wood talking to her was completely different from Mr. Wood talking to Mrs. Wood just now. One was stern and the other was tender. You are making a lot of noise in the ward because you want to see Natalie. After all, she is your daughter, Shawn asked. Yes. Then you are looking for the wrong person. Natalie is in my hands. You should come to me. Heather was startled. Has Natalie offended you? Before Shawn could answer, she hurriedly begged for mercy. Natalie has been pampered since she was a child, so she doesn't know what to do. If she had done something wrong, please forgive her. Mary could not take it anymore. Natalie grew up under my care. I taught her everything. I taught her to be polite. Everyone praises her behavior in the circle of high-class, rich wives and daughters. She fell because of her own doing. Mary snorted. Before, I didn't quite understand why the daughter I taught by myself became so strange, so narrow-minded, and did such bad things that were utterly devoid of conscience. Now that I see you, I understand everything. There are some things that can't be changed. It's in her blood, no matter how hard I raise her. Your trashiness will still be enraged in her bones. It's genetic. Since Shawn was here, Heather did not dare speak out and let Mary scold her. After she finished scolding, she asked, What has Natalie done that is so wicked? Ask Matthew. Didn't he tell you everything? Chapter 1320. He is using me as a weapon. Heather was initially arrogant, but she felt she could be tough with Matthew's help. Unexpectedly, she was a complete clown. If she had known earlier, she might as well not have come. Now that she has shown herself, the days ahead would be difficult. Mary found out her own daughter, Natalie, offended Mr. Wood, and Matthew's company shut down. Matthew did not mention a single word to her about these things. What now? Heather rolled her eyes, thinking of a plan. She suddenly started crying. Matthew deceived me so badly. She began to howl, completely without caring for her image. Yet, no one bothered her and was just quietly watching her act. I've been with him for so many years. I've been hidden, and I've been poked fun as a mistress all my life. I'm an innocent girl. I secretly gave birth to a child for him, and I've never been married. I ruined my life's happiness. I thought I could see a glimmer of hope, but I didn't expect. I didn't get anything at all. Now, I might even lose my daughter. My life is so bitter. Why am I so miserable? I can't live anymore. I can't live anymore. Heather wiped away her tears, stood up, and ran outside. Stop! Shawn's voice sounded. It was over. Her trick failed. She would not be able to leave. Shawn saw through her tricks at a glance. Are you done? Come back. Heather stood stiffly on the spot. Mr. Wood, do you have any other orders? I'll let you go. Natalie's won't fault implicate you. After all, she didn't even know who you were before this. Yes, yes, yes. I have a question for you. Heather nodded furiously. Ask away. As long as I know, I will tell you. She looked at Shawn expectantly and hoped that she could leave after answering. She could not stay here for a second. She was going to look for Matthew. He lied to her. Shawn stared deeply into her eyes. His eyes were deep and sharp. Back then, did the disappearance of Gale have anything to do with you? Heather froze in place, blinking nonstop. After several seconds, Heather replied, It has nothing to do with me. Sure? Heather laughed. Of course. I'm just a lowly person. How could I come up with such a plan? She hurriedly said again, Anyway, it's a good thing that Mrs. Wood is back now. Speaking of which, you are Natalie's younger sister. Oh, it's so wonderful. Stop talking nonsense here. I want nothing to do with Natalie, Gale said. Mrs. Wood, you are bonded by blood.